and she's going to tell us a little bit about different career tracks that she's thought about and what her day-to-day life is like. So
Yeah, of course. Thank you, guys. So as Professor Beck just said, I'm Kaitlyn. You pretty much like stole my opening line there. I was going to say, when I was in those same desks, although as Pete just mentioned, they're new desks from 4 years ago, but when I was in those desks just under 4 years ago, and I was kind of trying to make those next decisions, figuring out what I was going to do next, I was telling everybody that I was going to go into the private sector. And it sounds like I was very convincing. Professor Beck sounded convinced there. I would argue maybe at the time I didn't exactly know what that meant. And I have followed through with that, very happy with all those decisions. But I think at the time I could have benefited from somebody coming in and giving a talk about what does the private sector mean? So kind of hoping to address those questions that you guys might have today. And feel free to kind of pipe in anytime you have questions. Pete, I don't know if I'm doing something wrong here, but I'm not able to see you guys anymore. So you'll just kind of have to shout out if you have any questions.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So just kind of a really brief overview, just planning to start with some quick background information and then kind of give a really broad overview of my interpretation of private sector for meteorology, and then talk a bit about my position and the company that I work for, and then kind of end with some more broad kind of industry opportunities. So diving right in, skipping the first 18 years, starting right at undergrad. And I should add, I'm originally from Wisconsin. I am from about an hour and a half north of Madison, kind of in the Sheboygan and Plymouth area, if anybody's familiar with that. I started undergrad in 2012, graduated 2016. Obviously did the AOS department. Was at Madison. I also was part of AMS. I was actually also a member of the UW marching band, which was also a great opportunity. A lot of work, but some very, very cool experiences, of course, came from that. I was also involved with outreach through the department. While I was in undergrad, I worked with Professor Beck. We worked on MJO convergence theories, and that was it was really great research. It really actually did. I continued to study tropical meteorology in my grad research, so it was pretty influential in the next couple of years for me. We also applied for and received a Hilldale undergrad faculty research fellowship for some of that. And also just kind of for you guys' reference, I was using MATLAB for all of the analysis. I imagine that most of you are either using MATLAB or preferring Python these days. So just kind of throwing those out there. I listed the courses in the department. I'm sure most of those look familiar to you guys as well. And then I also went to AMS in 2016 down in New Orleans. So all of this is kind of just the fast facts of my time at Madison. I had a great experience in the department. I came out of Madison feeling like I had a really quality degree in atmospheric science, and I maybe didn't know it at the time, but I was very well prepared for grad school at SUNY Albany. So kind of a testament to the department and the professors there. So then I went on to grad school in SUNY Albany and continued to study tropical meteorology with Dr. Paul Roundy. And there I worked on MJO phase speeds. So just a super quick overview of that. If you guys are familiar with the MJO at all, it's active convection that travels across the equator. And if you've read a single MJO paper, I think almost guaranteed to be close to the very first sentence. It's, active convection moving eastward across the equator at about 5 meters per second. That's how almost all the papers start. But I should clarify, that sentence is at an average of 5 meters per second. So our research group was looking into MJO events that were moving maybe at 2 meters per second or at 8 meters per second. and kind of studying the extratropical response to those events that were moving at different speeds, and also kind of looking into what motivated those different phase speeds as well. So it was really cool research, and there's next to zero published work on the topic in general, so most of the work will be coming out of our group once we get the ball rolling on the publishing aspect. So it was a really cool project to be a part of, and we had multiple members of our research group working on very similar topics, so it helped that it was pretty collaborative as well. And then again, just to note that I was continued to use MATLAB for my analysis. I think increasingly by the time I got to grad school, most people were doing their analysis in Python though. While I was in grad school, I went to a couple different AMS events. I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but any opportunity that you have to travel to those events, they're really great events. It can be stressful to put together an abstract that's 8 months before you have any results, but and stressful to put the presentations together. But they're great events for personal growth and for networking and just building connections that you'll truly run into for the rest of your lives in the field of atmospheric science. So then when I was in grad school, I was involved in a couple different things that were almost as important, I would say, as the education that I got in grad school. One of the big ones for me was I worked as a meteorology consultant for the company Citadel. And even taking a step back here, when I was trying to decide which grad school to go to, I chose to go to Albany, and specifically to work with Paul Roundy because he had a ton of private sector connections. He was very upfront about those and was very interested in helping his students get involved in those relationships. And so, since I was interested in the private sector, that I was very interested in that opportunity. So Paul had a great relationship with Citadel, and so while I was, on his research team, I was able to kind of fill that role of the meteorology consultant for Citadel. Citadel, as a company, they are a global investment company that specializes in wealth management. So you should pretty much just think of dollar signs. And they're essentially investing this money in the stock market, and the goal, the name of the game, is to grow the money and not lose the money. And they have a natural gas trading desk, and they have a team of meteorologists that advise for that natural gas trading desk. So the meteorologists are, the lead meteorologist there is essentially advising a broker to make educated decisions on where to allocate financial resources in the stock market. And for the meteorologist, they were essentially making these decisions based on temperature profiles that would be impacting supply and demand of natural gas. So when I was working with them, Citadel was very focused on the region that basically went from Chicago over to the East Coast and then north. So kind of think of that quadrant of the United States. And they wanted to know, they're very interested in kind of the long-term forecast, so I would say 7 to 14 days. And they also needed to know any, quick, drastic, sudden events that were going to impact that region. So they would take that information and, carry it down the line and make educated decisions that impacted oodles and oodles of dollars. So it was a fascinating position. It's such a cool application of, our background. It's such a cool way to apply our meteorology skills. I will say that I was a consultant, and I was reporting to the main decision maker on the meteorology team. And even we'll call it a consulting, we could also essentially call it an internship role. Even in my position, I could tell that this was a very stressful job. And I can't imagine being the one who has to make these decisions. So something to consider for sure, but it was a great opportunity. And And then kind of switching gears, the other thing that I got involved with in grad school that might not have the same amount of appeal, but I worked as a tutor, and I was tutoring for high school students that typically needed help with math and science. And I would actually argue that tutoring taught me just as many skills as, as the meteorology consultant for Citadel position, or even as parts of my grad school experience. And the biggest takeaway from tutoring for me was the ability to take a complex problem and essentially kind of like translate it into a language that's helps somebody else understand. And that has really stuck with me in my position right now, actually, is being able to take those complicated subjects and translate them, or even like distill them into a language that makes sense to somebody else. So that was a really cool, it was a great skill to learn. And aside from that, it was in the tutoring position, I met a lot of people that were different than myself and really enjoyed that opportunity. So from there, then I graduated in spring 2018 and then started working at the company that I'm at now. So next, before we talk about the company I'm at right now, I'm just going to talk a little bit more broadly about the private sector for a second. So this was probably the question that I was asking myself about 4 years ago. And so this is kind of my stab at the private sector. So the biggest a big takeaway here is in the private sector, you're going to be applying meteorology. And because you are applying it, that pretty much creates a business. And so most of the time you're going to be doing science, but it's going to be in some sort of a business capacity. In the private sector, so kind of looking at the chart over here, basically a lot of times I would say the goal of the science is to address a specific need in the market. So say, for example, somebody is trying to come up with a solution for airline pilots, and this person realizes that if we give this pilot this information at this part of his flight, then he doesn't need to look up this information later and this information later and this information later. We can simplify his workflow. And with that, idea, they just created a product. And now it turns into a business, and you've got to market that and, build it and everything like that. So, so in general, you're applying meteorology, but it's for a business purpose. And with that, the is quite different in comparison to academia. So here, the private company has to be able to fund development and has to be able to fund innovation. And that money is typically going to come from private investors or from a board of directors, something like that, which differs from academia where, a lot of times the funding is going to come from a grant somewhere. And I would say if you guys get nothing else from this talk, and this might be a surprising takeaway, but if you have any interest in the private sector, I would actually recommend trying to find opportunities, at least to some level, to be exposed to the business world. There was a meeting that I took part in, I think a month after I started in my current position, and a big long table, lots of people sitting around this table, and I was pretty much sitting in the back, twiddling my thumbs and thinking, wow, I could have used a business class to just kind of understand how this should be going right now. So so that would be one of my big recommendations if possible. I know you guys are mostly done with picking your classes here at Madison, but if you have the opportunity to take a class like that or can find another way to get that exposure. So jumping over and talking a little bit about, what's that?
To answer the question quick.
Yes,
sorry to interrupt, but
no problem.
That's really interesting. I wonder if you could give us a little bit more of your perception there and like expand on that story a little bit? I mean, I think it's fantastic advice. I'd just be curious if you give us some more information about what you saw that was just different or anything like that at that meeting.
Yeah, how about we talk about my positions and then I'll try and answer that question in a minute, if that's okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so jumping over to kind of talk a little bit about now what I do here at our company. So I'm actually going to talk about my previous position first, and then we'll switch over and talk about the position I'm in right now. But when I first applied to work here, our company was called Weather Analytics, and I got hired in June. Well, okay, I started in June 2018, and within the first month of me being here, the formal languages we acquired and merged with a company called Athenium, and then we rebranded our combined companies as Athenium Analytics. So it was a little sad to lose the title of, or the name of Weather Analytics. Our CEO actually had a meeting with all of us that have a background in meteorology and sat us all down and said, we're changing our name, but I don't want you to feel less important. So obviously weather is still a huge part of our company. Our company in general was founded back in, I believe, 2012, and it started with a scientist or an engineer from MIT, and he took a reanalysis data set and did a bunch of cleaning to it, did a bunch of editing, added a bunch of value to the data set in terms of calculating new variables and converting units and making everything into a more easily client accessible format, basically making it so somebody that doesn't have a background in meteorology could still work with the data a little bit easier. And that data set pretty much turned into the foundation of our company. And the first product that our company built was a historical weather risk tool, and it was marketed towards underwriters in the insurance sector. So an underwriter is the person that makes the decision about whether or not to write an insurance policy. And so, for example, an underwriter would, if they're writing a homeowner's policy for a house in Oklahoma, they would be able to log into our tool and look at the historical weather risk at that address in Oklahoma. So we have all of our products on a scale of 1 to 10, so they can get a score for winter storms to see how severe the winters are there. They can get a score for hail to see if hail is something they need to take into consideration when they're writing the policy for this house. If they're in Oklahoma, they better be taking tornadoes into consideration. So we do a bunch of different natural perils. We even branch a little bit into earthquake, things like flood. We've even branched into things like wildfire. And that's all. So this is all kind of from a historic perspective. And the underwriter can take that information, decide if they want to essentially take on the risk associated with writing that policy. And if they want to, and if they decide to take on that risk, how to price that policy. So that was our very first product. And from there, we've really expanded. Initially within weather data, we've got forecasting tools, we've got post-event verification tools. So this is more for the claims side of insurance now, where we have really granular data showing essentially what happened at each location across the United States. We have really granular hail data, for example. And after a hailstorm moves through, insurance companies need to know, right off the bat, they need to know how much loss to expect from that hailstorm. They need to be prepared to allocate their resources. They need to figure out if they should be sending claims adjusters into the field to go look at these houses specifically. They also can use this information to help fight against fraudulent claims. If somebody in this location is saying that they had huge hail at their house and they log into our tool and look at it and see that the hail swath is on the other side of town and that their house was not actually harmed, they can choose not to pay out that claim. Features like that. So we have a bunch of different weather products. We also really branched into hurricane forecasting tools as well. When our company made the strategic decision to acquire the company Athenium, they were more of a robust insurance company. They don't have anything to do with weather. They're just purely an insurance analytics company. Our company in general is kind of moving in that direction, a little bit less based on weather and more just pure data analytics. But we're never going to fully branch away from the weather products, and they're very crucial and intertwined with our entire business. So that's kind of a broad overview of our company. The very first position that I worked in was an account manager for our weather data clients. So I've kind of been mentioning, obviously, all these different weather products that our company maintains. And in order to maintain all those products, we are ingesting a ton of weather data. I mean, basically, like everything that you can imagine. A bunch of reanalysis data, we're ingesting radar data, ground station data. Those are the only ones coming to mind, but we truly do ingest a whole bunch. Satellite data, that was another one. So we have data at all sorts of different resolutions. Some is global, some only spans the US. We do calculations with it, calculate specific perils. So, and all of this feeds our products, but then we also, we just have to have that data on hand here. So some very smart person in our company decided, why don't we just sell that data directly as well? And it turns out there's absolutely a market for raw data. And from our perspective, we essentially market it as solution-ready data. So we do all the ingesting, we do all of the QC, we maintain the data, we make sure it's clean, we get it ready for our clients, and then all they need to do is essentially from our API. I'll explain that in a sec. And then they can ingest it into their solutions. They can do whatever they want with it, use it for whatever internal purposes they need. And I was basically in charge of all sides of those relationships for the weather data clients. So I was working on, I was like the first line of client support. So I was their resource for both tech and data questions. I was also in charge of maintaining the contracts for all of these clients, making sure that they stayed within the bounds of their contracts in terms of how much data they could use and what data sources they had access to, as well as making sure they renewed their contract every year and paid us accordingly every year. And all these clients were using our API. So the API, it stands for Application Programming Interface. And it's basically, you can essentially think of it as a cloud. We would give our clients an API key, which was like a 32 alphanumeric password, essentially. And using that, they can just key right into our database and pull whatever data they need. And we're tracking how much they use on the backside, and they would essentially buy data in buckets, and once they used up their bucket, then they couldn't pull any more data. So I learned a lot on the tech side to understand how these APIs work. I learned a lot on the data side, and obviously having the meteorology background was pretty crucial to success in that regard, because this was all meteorology data. And then, like I said, on the business side, I was in charge of maintaining all of these clients' contracts and in charge of upselling them to if they wanted more data, or if they and their company had any opportunity to expand to a new data set or a new resolution or anything like that. So I had a really close relationship with all of our clients, and I really understood the market and understood the market need. And it was fascinating to learn, and I truly enjoyed everything about this position. Clients can be demanding. Sometimes they're not great to work with. I imagine it's kind of like having kids. Like truthfully, you love them the whole time, but at times you're just very frustrated with them. But overall, I don't know, I think it was a very valuable opportunity. And I kind of put a little bullet point on the bottom there. What maybe helped me feel the most prepared for that position. And of course, I think everything that I had learned in my meteorology background added to my, it made me more well-suited for the position right from the get-go. And then the other thing that was really crucial was that tutoring position, because I had to do a lot of that, that translating for people, whether it was taking something that our tech team told me and I had to turn around and explain that complicated situation to the client, or taking something that our meteorology team had told me and I was now responsible for relaying that to the client. Or my favorite was taking something that our internal tech team told me and I had to relay to our internal Met team. lots of that as well. So there's a lot of translating, I guess, that I had to do in that position. So I found that a very valuable skill. And then kind of jumping over, so more recently I've been switching over to be a product manager. In my previous position, I was basically working with the fixed product and communicating with clients directly about it. Now I'm not communicating with the clients nearly as much, and this is more development of the products themselves. So I have a list of several different weather products, including kind of those APIs that I was very familiar with from my first position, now including our post-event verification, our post-event weather verification product, our forecast product, and our hurricane products. And I'm in charge of really understanding the market for each of these products and working on all the internal development that we're doing on them, whether it's bug fixes, which we have to do, and also building a trajectory for those products in the future and kind of figuring out where we want to take those products moving forward. And also just understanding where the priority lies throughout our entire company. All of these things are responsibilities in my new role. And I haven't been in this role as long, so I can't speak quite as much about what in my background has helped prepare me for this. But I would say right off the bat that client experience and understanding kind of the market from my first position has been, again, really crucial to understanding the second position. And now that I'm in charge of hurricane products, I'm very glad to have taken some tropical classes, both at Wisconsin and in Albany. So I'm going to just pause for a second there. Do you guys have any questions? Okay.
I guess, can we come back to Dan's question, or?
Yeah. So I think in that position, I was at a client meeting, and we were talking about developing different products and talking about things in the contract that we had in our active contract with that client. And I mean, it was my first exposure to a business meeting, and it was executives that have been in business their entire lives, and I was coming from a background of science my entire life, and in that moment maybe felt a little bit out of place, but since then have very much grown from that opportunity. And I mean, I think like anything else, if the roles were reversed and it was a business executive sitting in on a science talk, they wouldn't necessarily understand some of the language that's being used or understand the reason a talk is structured the way that it was, things like that. So I think it was truly just, this would happen to anybody in a new environment, but in that moment yeah, I was really wishing for a business class.
So wow, just cultural and language and.
Yeah, I would say so.
I mean, it's like, to me, I would be very nervous about going into that sort of a situation. I think. I mean, I suppose though you learn quick and
Yeah.
I guess a certain amount of bravery in just jumping in.
Yeah, some of that too. Yeah, absolutely. And we can move on here. These were kind of just some generic slides that I pulled from from a standard marketing deck that just kind of provide a brief overview of our company. I'm not going to spend too much time on these, but if you guys are curious, this is how our company kind of markets ourselves. And these are some of our main products here. Again, I'm just going to kind of gloss through this. Move over to the meteorologists that work in our company. So our company has a Met team. The main roles of the Met team are they're responsible for ingesting all of the meteorology data that we use. They're in charge of maintaining all of those QC processes, and they're constantly working on making those processes better, making our analysis methods better. For example, next week we're releasing an update to our tornado tracking algorithm, and I've seen the befores and afters. It's significantly better. So features like that, those fall on the responsibility of the Met team. And now we're working on enhancing our hurricane forecasts as well. That's a Met team responsibility. We have, I think there's 7 people on that meteorology team. So 7 full-time meteorologists in our company. But I went through and counted, and I totaled up 20 different people in our company that have a background in meteorology. And we have about 120 employees, so that's a pretty significant fraction. Our CEO has our CEO really likes putting meteorologists in other positions. And I think in our company it really works well because the products that everybody's working with are still meteorology products. They're still weather-based products. So for example, these 3 people on the sales team that have a background in meteorology, you can kind of understand how they would be more effective at selling a weather-based tool just because of their background. They're going to be able to speak more confidently about the data and where we're getting the data, what we're doing to the data, how we want to present that to the clients, everything like that. Same goes for the account management team. So these are the people that are interfacing with the clients directly, and they are, so they're working every day with clients that are using our meteorology tools. So to have a background in meteorology just really seems, I don't want to say crucial, but extremely valuable there. So there's also a couple of our executives that have degrees in meteorology, at least one person on the tech team, and a couple others. For your guys' information, I think 3 of these people have their PhDs. 2 of those people are on our Met team, and 1 of them is an executive. Quite a few of us have our master's degree. The other 5 on the Met team all have masters. I have mine. I think I counted myself here. One of the people in sales also has his master's. And then the rest do not have an advanced degree in meteorology, but I will put a little asterisk by that and say that out of everybody that doesn't have the advanced degree, most people came to our company with prior experience. So I wouldn't call them necessarily, it wasn't their first job out of school. And then I guess just for further information, in the time that I've been here, we've had turnover of 3 people on our Met team, and all 3 that left also had their masters in meteorology. That was all separate reasons, family situations and whatnot. But so just kind of for your guys' information, what kind of degrees are expected for these different positions kind of helps paint a little bit of a picture. And then just kind of to wrap up here with some more broad kind of industry opportunities, I would say. This is the weather company's website. TWC was bought out by IBM back in 2017, and this is not supposed to be a go work for IBM talk by any means. The only reason I mention all of this is because IBM obviously is going to be, they're a huge company. They're one of the leaders in, I guess I would call it private sector meteorology, and they have, this is from their website, they have a full list of the different industries that they have products for. So the whole IBM aspect of this, for somebody with a background in meteorology that's interested in pursuing the private sector, you can basically look at this as a list of options for your future. So these are all different industries that to some extent depend on meteorology. And if IBM has a solution for them, I guarantee there are other companies that have solutions as well. So that just opened up a whole door full of opportunities. And I would argue another industry that's not actually even listed here is shipping. And I don't know if IBM has that folded into one of their products here. So if you guys have any interest in kind of private sector opportunities, I would recommend going here, clicking around, if nothing else, just to familiarize yourself with the industries and what could become potential opportunities. And then just one last slide here. If you're still interested in private sector meteorology, there's a pretty good AMS board of private sector meteorology. I think you can find the group on like Facebook, Twitter, and just kind of, I imagine they might be on LinkedIn too, and just follow them, and they do a pretty good job of sharing information about opportunities, or they'll do webinars, just kind of various, it's just a source of information. And they do, I don't know if it's every semester or every year, but they do a mentorship program that it's a really good program, very easy to apply for. You can apply as a student, and then they also ask people in the industry to apply as kind of mentors, and then they'll go through and pair everybody up. And it's a very low-key, not a high obligation thing. It's just going to help you meet new people, kind of network, and really just introduce you to new opportunities throughout the private sector. So I did that one of my semesters in Albany, and by a fluke, I got paired up with somebody in New Jersey, and then she ended up moving to work for a company in Albany, so I ended up meeting up with her in person, and yeah, it worked out really well. So I would highly recommend that as well. So that is what I have for you guys today. So definitely let me know if you have questions, and if you have any questions that you won't think of later or want to talk about anything in particular, feel free to reach out to Dr. Beck or Pete. Any of them, I'm sure, could put us in touch, and be happy to help out. Thank you, guys.
I mean, I have a question about earlier in your presentation, you were talking about how even in
Can you hear okay?
Yeah, I'm just trying to stop sharing the screen so I can see you guys.
Down at the very bottom right, we found a button.
Got it.
So I was just wondering, you talked about how stressful even like an intern capacity can be as far as being on like a Met team. Could you talk a little bit more about that, like operational meteorology?
Yeah. So that was when I was working for the investment company, and I think that was purely based. That environment there. These were people that were, in charge of making decisions that impacted millions and millions of dollars on a daily basis. And I think the weight of the decisions that they had to make, just by nature, it created a stressful environment for them. And so that stress was going to kind of funnel down to all of us. So we could all, I understood that. I mean, you understand where they're coming from, right? And so in that one situation, I would call that a very stressful environment. I don't think that translates to private sector meteorology in general. I guarantee that the meteorology team here at our company, or even the position that I'm in, does not carry that same stress that specific position did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In terms of skills that you think helped you land either one of, or I guess your current, or the previous iteration of your current job in your current company, what are some of the key kind of skills that they were looking for, and I guess, or whether that be that you learned in school or outside, or what?
Yeah, so I think in my first position, I think the biggest thing that they were looking for was somebody that could talk to clients and communicate, meteorology concepts, but also, handle themselves well in a client-facing situation. And so I would actually argue that that was the most important skill for that first position. Kind of stepping away from that in general, I will say that both of the positions that I'm in now do not require coding skills. And I would argue that that is probably rare for meteorology jobs these days. So that was why I kind of just wanted to mention the programs that I used back when I was in undergrad and in grad school. But I know, for example, on the meteorology team here, that is a very coding job. And at our company, they're all using Python. So if I even, whatever path you're interested in pursuing, I would say there is a good chance that coding skills will be important in the future for that position. My job is kind of an anomaly, I would assume.
Yeah, and I guess, sorry, just a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Your ability to kind of speak with clients and so forth, that's fantastic. Do you get the sense that that your clients want that technical information, or do they want to know that they're dealing with someone who knows what they're talking about?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and part of that is my job to figure out their technical ability. And sometimes I'm talking with maybe a manager who he's speaking for the work that people below him are doing, and so he might not actually know the ins and outs. And so you have to be able to talk at a high level to certain people, but then in the next day, then I'm talking to the people that are working directly with our products, and now they want to know exactly the details on the tech side. They want to know exactly what the data, what we're doing to the data. And then, even outside of that, then they'll send me to their HR team to go finalize their contract. So there's a skill to be in terms of figuring out what level you need to be presenting your information at. And it's a tough skill to learn, I would say. But I think that everybody in our company has kind of had to learn to address that. Everyone on the client-facing side, for sure.
I can see where that tutoring would be a real asset.
Yeah, unexpectedly. I never, really, can't say I got into that position thinking that it was going to be transformative for my future, but it turned out it really was.
Okay. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you very much. And if people wanted to contact you to ask other questions or to network or anything,
Mm-hmm.
pass your information around?
Absolutely, yeah, please feel free.
Great, thank you very much. This is exactly
Yeah, of course. Good luck with the rest of your semester, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Kaitlyn. Appreciate it.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
I'm going to check the calendar here quickly.